In 1933, a decorated United States Marine Corps general walked into Congress with a shocking claim. He said that powerful American businessmen were plotting to overthrow the President of the United States. Not in some distant country, not in secret whispers overseas, here, in America. And according to him, they wanted him to lead the coup. This became known as the business plot of 1933, one of the strangest and most controversial political scandals in American history. But was it a real attempt to overthrow Franklin D. Roosevelt? Or was it all a misunderstanding, or even an exaggeration? To understand the story, you have to understand America in 1933. The country was in the depths of the Great Depression. Banks were collapsing, millions were unemployed, businesses were failing, bread lines stretched for blocks, entire families lost their savings overnight. Confidence in the American economic system was shattered. Franklin D. Roosevelt had just taken office and immediately launched what became known as the New Deal, a sweeping series of programs designed to stabilize banks, regulate the financial system, create jobs, and restore hope. To millions of struggling Americans, Roosevelt was a lifesaver. But to some wealthy industrialists and financiers, he was something else entirely. They believed he was expanding federal power too aggressively. They feared increased regulation. They worried about higher taxes. Some even claimed his policies resembled European systems that concentrated too much authority in the hands of government. Whether those fears were justified or not, tensions between big business and the Roosevelt administration were real. Now, enter Major General Smedley Butler. Butler was not an unknown figure. He was one of the most decorated Marines in U.S. history, a two-time Medal of Honor recipient, and widely respected among veterans. He was also openly critical of war profiteering and corporate influence in government. In 1934, Butler testified before Congress that a group of wealthy businessmen had approached him with a proposal. They allegedly wanted him to lead a force of up to 500,000 veterans to march on Washington. The goal, according to Butler, was to pressure President Roosevelt into handing over real executive power to a new position, essentially a Secretary of General Affairs, who would run the government while Roosevelt remained as a ceremonial figurehead. In other words, they didn't necessarily plan to remove Roosevelt outright. They planned to control him. Butler claimed he was approached by a bond salesman named Gerald McGuire, who spoke of raising funds, organizing veterans, and modeling the movement after European paramilitary groups. The idea was to create a mass veterans organization that could be mobilized quickly and decisively. Instead of agreeing, Butler went public. He reported the conversations to Congress. The matter was investigated by the House Un-American Activities Committee. During the hearings, Butler repeated his claims under oath. He described meetings, conversations, and plans that he believed pointed toward an organized effort to undermine the president. Some aspects of his testimony were confirmed. Investigators acknowledged that McGuire had traveled to Europe and studied fascist movements. They confirmed that discussions about organizing veterans had taken place. However, no one was prosecuted. No coup attempt occurred, and many major newspapers at the time dismissed the story as exaggerated or even absurd. Critics argued there was no concrete proof of a fully formed plan. Supporters of Butler insisted that just because the plan failed or never advanced, it did not mean it was imaginary. The committee ultimately concluded that there was evidence of discussions about forming such an organization, but it stopped short of declaring it a fully operational conspiracy. So what really happened? Some historians believe Butler genuinely uncovered a loose but serious attempt by certain elites to counter Roosevelt's policies through extraordinary means. Others argue the situation was inflated, that there were conversations, perhaps reckless ones, but not a coordinated coup. What makes the business plot so fascinating is how plausible it feels in the context of the time. The early 1930s were politically volatile. Around the world, democracies were struggling. Authoritarian movements were rising in Europe. Economic desperation often fuels extreme political ideas. In that atmosphere, the idea that powerful individuals might consider unconventional methods to protect their interests doesn't seem impossible. But at the same time, the United States had strong institutions. The Constitution remained intact. The military stayed loyal to civilian leadership. Roosevelt remained firmly in control. No armed march happened. No shadow government took power. No coup unfolded. Instead, the story faded into the background of history, resurfacing decades later as historians re-examined the testimony and documents. Today, the business plot remains debated. Was it an aborted conspiracy stopped by a principal general? Was it political maneuvering misinterpreted as treason? Or was it something in between? An example of how fragile political systems can feel during times of crisis. What is certain is this. In 1933, at the height of economic collapse, a decorated American general believed he had been asked to help undermine the President of the United States. Whether the threat was fully real or not, the moment reflects how unstable and uncertain that era truly was. The business plot serves as a reminder that during periods of fear and financial collapse, political tensions can rise to extraordinary levels. And sometimes, the most unusual stories in history emerge not from what happened, but from what almost did.